In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to use a concrete saw. Find out how coming up next. What's going on, folks? Ken here with Renos for Pros and Joes, helping you simplify the renovation and remodeling process. On this channel, we do hands-on product, tool, and gear reviews, as well as renovation tip and strategy videos. So if you're interested in renovation, remodeling, repair, property maintenance, or real estate, then subscribe, because this channel and this content is for you. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to use a concrete saw. A concrete saw is a tool that can be invaluable when you're going to be doing projects like concrete driveway repair, or even some plumbing projects that require you to be able to cut out a specific section of floor to be able to put it back neatly. Now, one of the main reasons why I made this video was particularly because when you go to the tool rental place, even if you don't have experience renting a tool, they're not going to ask you a ton of questions with regards to what your experience is. They're going to tell you what the rates are. They're going to ask you if you want to put an additional insurance policy on that tool, and they're going to basically cut you loose. Now, if you tell them that you need to have some instruction on how to start it, how to stop it, and things like that, they will show you how to do it. But essentially, you're going to be on your own. So hopefully you're able to watch this video and pick up some pointers and at least have a general idea of how the tool is supposed to work. Now, as I said, this is going to be your best option if you're going to be making a small cut or going to only be making a few cuts. If you're going to be making a huge cut, it's going to be several hundred feet long. They also do make some concrete saws that you can walk behind that are a standing position that's almost like a lawnmower and things like that you can cut. Those make a lot more sense for large projects, and they do a very clean job, and they're easy to use. However, your rental rate is going to be in a completely different price point, and you're also going to have a special trailer and things like that to be able to move it around. So it's going to be overkill for most people who are going to be doing this as DIY. So first, I'm going to go over some of the personal protective equipment that you're going to need for a project like this, and then we will jump into the demo. So one of the most important pieces of personal protective equipment for a project like concrete cutting is going to be having a good set of goggles. And they don't necessarily have to be like these, but you want something that's going to be able to cover your eyes as much as possible, because you're going to have that saw spinning and you're going to have dust flying, as well as potentially some of that concrete water. And so you want to make sure that you don't get any of the liquid in your eyes, and you also want some dust protection from your eyes as well. So a good set of goggles is a must-have. So this next piece of PPE needs no introduction. Probably 2 months ago, no one even knew what this was. However, this is a respirator, and you don't necessarily have to have one like this, but you do want to have some type of facial covering when you're going to be using a concrete saw, because you do have dust and things like that flying up and floating around in the air, and you don't want to be inhaling that dust if you don't have to. One of the things that is created when you cut concrete is going to be a dust known as silica, and this is very bad for your respiratory system. So you want to limit your intake of that as much as possible. In addition to that, when you're running a concrete saw, most concrete saws are going to be gas powered, which means you also are going to have the exhaust fumes that are going to be permeating in the air, particularly if you're cutting inside. And so you also want to have the mask on for that reason. So facial protection is also a necessary PPE consideration. This next piece of PPE is one that is frequently forgotten about and overlooked. This is earmuffs or ear covers. The concrete saw is very loud, and it makes a lot of noise when you're actually in the process of cutting the concrete. The sound of that blade hitting and spinning against the concrete can also be kind of agitating for some people. So a good set of earmuffs, or even just the earplugs, will also do a very good job. I have links to all of these pieces of PPE in the description box below, with the exception of the respirator, of course. Now, in addition to having these pieces of PPE, there are also a few pieces of equipment that you're going to want to have in addition to your concrete saw. One is going to be a chalk line, or some way to be able to mark off the exact location where you want to have your cut on your concrete. And so today I'm not going to be using a chalk line because I could not put my hand on mine fast enough. So I'm just going to be marking off with chalk. Additionally, what you want to have on hand is also going to be some type of hammer. I've got a sledgehammer with me, which I'll grab here in 1 second. You may remember this hammer from a couple videos back when I was doing the demo hammer demonstration. But a demo hammer or a sledgehammer is going to be an excellent piece of equipment to have on hand when you're cutting concrete, because concrete is not always going to be a consistent thickness all the way through the slab. And what you want to make sure that is that when you use your concrete saw, that even if you cut all the way through, sometimes there may be a portion of that concrete that is not cut all the way through. And so if you've got a hammer on hand, you can tap the portion that you're going to be removing to make sure that you can get a clean break all the way through, so that it's going to be easy for you to pull those pieces out. Otherwise, you may be left with the piece that's hanging on, and it'll be difficult to be able to dislodge that because it's actually going to be still attached well down below the surface of the concrete, below a point where your blade can reach. Now, as I mentioned before, there are more than one type of concrete saws. This is an electric concrete saw, which I'm going to be demoing today. Most concrete saws that you're going to find at your local tool rental are going to be gas-powered saws. This saw is actually a hand saw and is designed to be able to cut vertically if you're going to be cutting out doorways and things like that through brick and concrete. So it's actually a multifunctional tool. It can also be used to cut slabs and things like that. It's not going to cut as fast or as efficiently as being able to cut with a big gas-powered saw. However, this saw is very powerful and it will still get the job done, and that's what we're going to be using today. As I said before, using a respirator is also going to be an important consideration because of the fumes that are going to be put off by the saw that you're going to be using. Now, this saw does not create fumes from running, obviously, because it runs on electricity. However, the trade-off is going to be obviously that we've got to be able to plug it in. A couple more advantages to using a saw like this is going to be, obviously, if you're going to be working inside of an occupied space, you won't have to worry about the fumes permeating out of the work area and into the areas where people are working or living. And so that's one plus to it. Another plus to this saw is that its form factor is quite a bit smaller than a gas-powered saw, which makes it easier to store if you're going to be storing it in a warehouse, or even if you're going to be storing it in a vehicle. It takes up a lot less space. And also, if you're going to be traveling with it, this is also going to be a very good option for pros who typically have their tools in their vehicle. One downside of using a gas-powered saw is that if you make a cut and you quickly end up wrapping your job up and need to move on to the next place, that saw is still going to be putting off fumes, and you don't want to have to put that in the back of your vehicle and have the fumes wafting up into the area in the front where you're going to be driving and you have occupants. And so if you've got an electric saw like this, you don't have to worry about that being a consideration. So just another couple of pointers on electric saws. You don't see them that frequently, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing the demo today. So let's get to the demo. One more piece of PPE before we get started is going to be gloves. I've got on rubber gloves today because we're going to be working with water with our concrete saw. You can use any type of glove that you want. I prefer the waterproof type, just to keep that concrete water off of my hands. You've seen the previous video where I showed you how to attach studs to concrete, then you may remember this setting here. I'm going to quickly prep this space up so we can have a clean place to cut concrete, and then we'll go ahead and get started. When you're preparing to cut concrete with a concrete saw, there are some times when you're going to run into some type of reinforcement inside of the concrete. It may be rebar, it may be some type of mesh, and I can look and see right here on the end of this concrete slab, even though it's 1,000 years old, I can see that there is wire mesh in this slab. So I'm aware that I'm going to have to cut a little bit more slowly, and that the saw may not cut as efficiently as it would if this was just straight concrete. So if we look closely here, we can see that there is rust stains here, and you can see that that's actually mesh in that concrete. And so we've got reinforcement in here, so we just need to take our time as we cut to ensure that we still get a good clean cut. Now, as I mentioned before, I'm gonna mark this off. This is typically where we would use a chalk line, but I'm gonna have to just use my tape measure here. I'm just gonna mark off a location and just kind of be consistent as I go. So we're gonna cut this thing from one side to the other. And I'm gonna just cut or mark 5 inches and then try to remain consistent, even though I know that this piece of concrete is not going to be consistently the same width all the way across. And we've got a few obstacles here to contend with, mainly these nails here. So there we go, you can see all the way across here. Now we're going to hook up this water line. This is going to be an integral part of using a saw like this because it's going to help minimize the amount of dust that's created. It's also going to help keep the blade cool, which is going to help prolong the life of the blade. If you're in a position where you're going to be renting one of these saws, hopefully your tool rental place is going to provide you with a good blade, because without a good solid sharp blade, it can take you forever to be able to make a cut, or it may not cut at all. And if you price the amount that these blades cost, you'll probably have a heart attack because it costs more than the rental of the saw itself in most instances. Just a quick tidbit of information. So I've got my water line and everything hooked up here. Now I'm going to position my saw so that I can make my cut properly. If you look at this saw, you can see that it is set up with the wheels on this side, and this needs to be on the portion where I'm going to be able to have good grounding to be able to level the saw. And as you can see, we're cutting off the edge here of this concrete slab, which means I'm going to need to really turn the saw around and bring it back this way so that the feet are on this side as opposed to it falling off the edge here on the side. Now, if I had planned for this a little bit earlier, I could have scooted my line further this way, and that way it would have enough place to rest on the portion that we're cutting off. Not a big deal. We're not going to go back and change it. We're just going to go ahead and cut it as it is and let the chips fall where they may. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready to cut the water on. As you can see, I've just turned the water on. This is what's going to help keep that blade cool and help minimize the dust. So here's my ugly little cut. You can look along here, you can see my line here. Not razor sharp. You can see I started off pretty good here, but it kind of veered away here. As I said, this thing is not level. The rebar and mesh in the concrete didn't really give me any issues. It was just more so the level or unlevelness of the surface and trying to hold my straight line there. So a quick recap, guys. You saw there when I first started out, I went over the concrete slab lightly, and then I came back through and went over a second pass and cut deeper. That's the point of that, is just to be able to score and try to maintain a straight line as possible. Then you go ahead and make your full plunge cut all the way through when you make your second pass. As I said, this is all about trying to make sure that your line is as straight as possible, because it's easier to maintain that straight line when you're not trying to cut all the way through the slab at one time. Additionally, when you do that, you're also trying to make sure that you can pull that saw across the entire length of your cut line without washing all the chalk away. So two purposes for doing that, but essentially trying to achieve the same goal. Another thing that I want to point out with regards to using concrete saws, that if you notice when I was cutting that I wanted to make sure that my cord was out of the way, as well as my water hose, as well as hands and knees and feet. I've got on steel toe boots, which is another piece of PPE that I forgot to mention. You don't necessarily have to have on steel toes. This is just what I prefer to work in, but you want to make sure that you keep all of your materials and equipment out of the path of the saw, and you want to make sure that your work area is clear of any type of debris or obstacles and things that may present an issue for trip hazards and things like that. So make sure your work area is clean, and you should have no real problems. So the main reason that I wanted to make this video was for people who are doing this for the first time, because what you will find out is that when you go to the tool rental place to rent a tool, it's not like when you grew up and you were a kid where your parents told you what you could and couldn't do. When you go to the tool rental place and you want to rent a tool, they're going to point to it and they're going to tell you how much it costs for an hourly rate or a daily rate or a weekly rate. And they're going to ask you if you want to add an additional insurance policy on top of the rental of the tool. That's pretty much it. Now, if they sense that you don't know what you're doing, they may ask you, hey, do you know how to start it and stop it and things like that, and show you the basic overall functions of the saw. But essentially that's it. They're going to cut you loose, and so you're going to end up having a tool like this that is dangerous if you don't know how to use it, and you're going to have to figure it out on your own, essentially on the job. And so hopefully this can serve as a bit of a primer to help get you familiar with how the saw works and what to expect as it cuts. As you saw, the blade spins at a pretty good rate of speed, but not uncontrollably fast, not nearly as fast as the blade spins on a circular saw or something like that. But as you can see, it did a very good job of cutting through that concrete and making a very clean cut, and didn't have a whole lot of mess. Now the water and the runoff is going to be something that you do have to be concerned with, particularly if you're going to be working inside. You want to make sure that you have an idea of where that water is going to run, so that you can potentially try to capture it or direct it into another direction where you won't make a huge mess. I'm outside, so it's not that big of a deal, but another consideration to keep in mind. Also, it wouldn't hurt to wear clothes that you don't care about. As you can see, I still got concrete water on my pants, but not a big deal because I've got on work clothes. So just one more thing to consider. Hopefully you found this video informative. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, one more quick thing. I almost got out of here and forgot to demonstrate the last piece. As you can see, we've made our cut line here, and we've cut through as much as possible. But if you can look and see, the concrete, while it's scored probably the majority of the way, we can rest assured that this piece of concrete is not the same thickness all the way through. And so this would be a situation where you would want to tap this thing with your hammer. And so since I've got my hammer and I showed it to you, let's go ahead and tap it and see if we can get this thing to break off. All right, you can see I've got the camera and everything set up here. If I bounce here, you can see that it is not moving. So let's just tap this thing a couple of times and see if we can't get it to break. See that? And there we have it. So now you can see that piece is loose now, where it wasn't loose before. Hopefully you can see that. And the other pieces are also loose as well. You can hear it smacking together in there. So That's it. See you guys on the next one.